Serious, what was your biggest we need to leave now moment? I was home from college for a holiday weekend. A college friend was from the same town and he was home too. We were looking for something to do on Saturday night and heard that an old friend was having a party, so we decided to stop by. This old friend had developed new friends while we were gone, neo-Nazi skinheads. They had visible tattoos of Nazi symbols. Did I mention that the friend I brought is definitely not a white guy? We got the heck out of there pretty quick. In China, on a school trip, wandering around night market stalls of fried bugs and bull testicles, in a group of 10 or so high school age kids, a 50-60ish YO, Chinese man engages us in conversation, claiming to be the curator of a local art gallery. Do we want to check out some paintings? Sure, we were bored and had lost our appetite pretty quickly anyhow. Well, we get to the gallery, which was a semi-rundown 5 by 5 meters building. The Chinese man talks to us from the doorway, inviting us in to see the paintings which are downstairs. The building is in the middle of a large paved courtyard, right next to a popular tourist destination. It's safe, right? Peering through the doorway, no artwork or obvious function to the building is visible. An entrance lamp is broken with its glass scattered over the doorway, and inside shoddy steps led to a dank unlit basement. One of us interrupts Chinese man's sweet talking. Come down. See painting. To grill him on the broken glass. Don't worry, many paintings. Beautiful. No. Tell me why there's broken glass. At this point we're all exchanging glances, when I get the urge to break our collective stupor by yelling cheese ITTTT. As a group we turn tail into a sprint, covering 100 yards or so before we slow down to laugh and crack jokes about kidnapping and organ black markets. Glad it was the best memory from my trip and not the last one. When me, 11, and my mom were feeding some cows we had bought with some other people. There was supposed to be 8, but when we walked into the field they were being hurled at, there was only 7. Suddenly a massive black heifer emerged from some bushes 50 meters away from us and just started bolting towards us, swinging its head wildly. I literally said to my mom, I think we need to leave now, but the bewildered bovine would easily have sprinted us down and trampled us to death. So my mom stepped towards it, spreading her arms out wide and screaming bloody murder. It sounded like somebody had kicked a bull in the nuts, and it luckily was intimidating enough to make the cow stop and lumber away. Second cow ambush story. Those cows are wily. Late afternoon in the summer, I'm waiting in the bus station near my house. Most businesses are closed, not a lot of cars in the street. Guy passes in front of me. He passes again 2 minutes later, watching me suspiciously. Alarms start to go in my head, screaming to me that I need to leave and get the frick off here. But I ignore it since the bus will come in 10 minutes. Third time he passes, he charges to me, pushing me to the wall with his dong out. I freeze for some seconds, then start punching and kicking him. I manage to get away and the rest is history. Yeah, trust your guts, guys. I lived really close to my school when I was a kid, and there was this big thing for us to play in, so naturally I always went to play there in the evening before supper or just any time I was bored. It was surrounded by a lot of houses and a busy street, so it was a safe enough place. One day I went with a friend of mine who was about a year older than me. We had 2 schoolyards, one for the older kids and one for the younger ones. The big plastic thing was in the younger kids' yard. There was a small corridor that let us go between yards though, and as we're playing I see this guy wearing a hoodie with the hood up start slowly walking into the yard we were in. We stayed there for about 20 minutes with the guy, but I felt that something was very off. I was too young to really know what to do and imagined he would leave at some point. The problem was that he was slowly walking around a wall, blocking all the houses from seeing him, and was much closer to the exit than we were. I will always remember watching him nonchalantly kick a pizza box around as he made his way closer to us. As I turned to my friend to tell her that we had to leave because I felt like something really bad was going to happen, I heard my father below my name and saw him running the length of the schoolyard towards the door with my neighbor in tow. My father was in his 60s and took his car everywhere, and that's the first time I ever saw him really run. The guy bolted and my father trailed after him. My neighbor brought us to my friend's house as they all knew each other, and we stayed there until pretty late. I remember her mother trying to explain to us what a child molester was. I was 9 at most and I just knew that I was terrified. My father, my neighbor and my friend's father both tried to find the guy. I can imagine how scared he must have been. My father was very tall and intimidating, and so were my neighbors. The scariest part of this is that I still have no idea how my father had known, as the guy wasn't visible and I lived a few houses down from where we were. I'm sure that he saved mine and my friends' lives that day. My friends and I stopped at a 7-Eleven around midnight in a sketchy neighborhood. We'd taken a wrong turn and were trying to find our way back to the highway. 2 police officers were getting coffee and donuts. A group of local youth came in, kind of roughly messing with each other. The police officers looked at them, looked at us, looked at each other, and power walked out of the store. My friends and I decided not to complete our snack food purchases and made to leave, and then one of the youths yelled to his friends that we'd called him a racial epithet when we hadn't even spoken to them. I'm glad my car started on the first try, and glad no one was coming the other way as I ran a couple stop signs. So I was waiting at the train station to pick up a friend of mine. I was early, so I decided to stand in the sun right outside of the station. A guy with a bicycle walked up to me asking in broken English if I knew how late the train would arrive. After I answered the question, he stayed around and started talking to me. Now I know that's not weird at all, but the things he asked and the way he acted and looked just gave me a creepy vibe. Eventually he asked if I would walk with him while he dropped his bicycle off. I didn't want to because the place to store bicycles at this station is very secluded, and to be honest I didn't want to be alone with this guy. So I noped out and walked into the station. He started yelling at me, calling me names, but at that moment the train came in and it got very busy, so he left. A few months later I read this article in the local paper about a girl being raped at the station. They had put a drawing of a guy next to the article as he was not yet caught. It was the same guy. To this day I'm very happy I didn't go with him. I was hiking with 2 friends and we were crossing through some big farms. One of the fenced off areas had a herd of cows in it. They had like 20 calves and 150 cows. As we were walking through, they slowly ganged up on us from behind and literally encircled us, facing inwards while standing next to each other. I think they surrounded us by like 300 degrees before we realized what was happening and freaking ran like heck the last 50 meters to the edge of the fenced area. I think the opening between the 2 ends of the open circle was like 20 meters and they were like 20 meters away from us. That was pretty insane, TBH. I will never forget it. I learned to differentiate between the behavior of one creature opposed to a herd. It blew my mind how they all worked together in silence. I have never experienced fear physically like in that moment. When we hopped the fence they followed us to the edge. There was one black bull in particular who didn't seem to like we got away. I always assumed he was the leader. When I was about 16, I went to visit my grandmother at her place. The smell of natural gas was intense. Even though Nana didn't seem to notice it much. She was groggy, sort of half asleep, not her usual responsive self. So I made her get out of the house at once and opened the windows and doors. I called Dad and he reported it to the gas company, who sent inspectors right away. They shut off the gas valve in the street immediately and sent a repair crew to fix a leaking joint in the gas supply pipe. The inspector said that if I hadn't acted then and there, the probability was great that there would soon have been an explosion. I was in a school play when I was about 12/13. This was one of the rare opportunities I got to be in the school after it had closed, so I took the chance to have a walk around the empty rooms while the other kids and teachers were all in the main hall. It was about 7 p.m. At the back of the school was a bunch of temporary classrooms all in darkness, so I wandered in. The temp classrooms had a storeroom that joined the classrooms together. It was only small with nothing but the usual classroom equipment in. From out of this storeroom came my English teacher. Now, the class and storeroom are in darkness. I know I shouldn't be there and I'm pretty sure he shouldn't either. Strangely, he doesn't act at all surprised and in fact beckons me over and tells me he has something he wants to show me in the storeroom. It all just felt wrong. As soon as he disappeared back into the storeroom I ran as fast as my legs could go. So what happened the next time you saw him? The owner of a Mexican restaurant threw 2 young farm workers at the bar out to the parking lot. They were drunk as monkeys and proceeded to try to fight, but mostly just leaned on each other, all in front of the picture window while the place is full of people. Then one runs to his trucks and burns rubber out of there. I said time to go honey. She says what, those buttholes undone and I'm not going to be here when the shooting starts. We left. It did. Not long after. My friend and I, both females, met up our first time back home from college. It was a surprisingly nice day outside in the middle of winter, so we decided to get lunch and eat outside. We found a park that had no one there and were sitting at a picnic table catching up when I see a scruffy looking guy in a large work van with no rear windows pull into the parking lot. I didn't pay a whole lot of attention to him at first, but I noticed he was moving around the outside of the van for a bit and he kept looking our way. He finally walked down the sidewalk toward us and passed by our picnic table and walked around the back side of the restroom building to look down the hill on the other side of it, very obviously casing out the place. He walked back to his van and me and my friend were discussing what we were going to do while I watched him open up the back of the van and start digging around it. He made a call on his cell phone and a few minutes later another male pulled up in a different car. He got out and started talking to the first guy, who not very discreetly pointed our direction. They immediately started walking toward us and my friend and I scooped what was left of lunch and fast walked out of the place while keeping an eye on them. One of the times in my life I could literally feel the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. It could have been nothing, but even now I feel pretty certain that they had something planned and I am glad we left. My friend invited me to a seminar. Everyone were dressed in white shirt and black pant with black shoes. I was odd one out in here. For some weird reason, they were praising founder as if he was some kind of god. When I went into the auditorium, they were showing how these 17-year-olds were earning Rs. 200,000 in a month, which is heck of a lot in India, translated to about $3,500, with their own bikes, cars and crap like that. Then it dawned upon me that this is eerily similar to one of the biggest scam in that used similar business model about 7 years ago at the time. I really wanted to move out ASAP. My brainwashed friend was sitting a few rows behind me. All of those involved in this marketing were required to do so for weird reason. It was cringy at best and exploitative at worst. Never caught up with him ever since. That friend of mine wasn't really bad person or anything. He didn't even force me to buy the product or anything. Maybe due to the fact that I studied in different city, the product seemed really good from outside but the method of selling really looked like one for MLM. There was another person in that group who was from my school, didn't know him in any way, who forced one of my family friend, went to same school, to buy that product. He then resorted to swearing and abused her online for not buying the product. I'm not sure if it is a full-fledged MLM because the participants weren't forced to buy product in bulk. Probably because all of them were students. I don't recall the name of the company, so IDK, how is that company still doing? Met this cute girl at a party, spent the whole night dancing and flirting, offered to drive her home and she agreed. We were making out in the car in front of her house when another car pulls up with their headlights beaming at us. I ask if that's a neighbor and if we're blocking their driveway. She replies no, that's my husband. Husband's car door opens and I noped the frick out of there. Dropped her straight back at the party and never saw her again. Her excuse was that they were separated and he shouldn't have a problem with it. I sure wasn't sticking around to find out. I've told this story before but it's been a while and may just get buried, but here goes. I was out in the country late at night taking some long exposure photographs of the Hale-Bopp comet as it approached the sun, which was marvelous by the way. I had driven out of town and just picked a dark, empty farmer's field to set up. Nice and dark. I'm out there for a couple hours when I get this massive feeling of I need to leave now. I pack up my camera, tripod and lawn chair, throw it all in my car, get in and start the car. When the lights of the car come on I see the Volt that was sitting 20 feet from where I was positioned, just sitting there staring at me. I've never gotten bigger chills in my life. The old reliable primal instincts still working after all those years. I was in South Africa in Cape Town with my wife. We were living there for the year and were going to get some dinner, so we hopped in a taxi with the intent to get off at Station Road. What we didn't know is that every suburb, which are only about half a mile long in some cases, have a station road where the train station is at. So we ask the driver to let us off when we notice that we had gone too far and he tells us that we should just hop back on a taxi and get back to where we needed to be. This should have been a huge red flag. It was the afternoon and still daylight, so we were like, nah, we'll just walk. We start walking down the street, which is one way, and it's like something from a movie. Grocery bags rolling like tumbleweeds. Some kid in his underwear pretending to shoot a gun at us. But otherwise it's pretty quiet. I noticed some guys behind us a ways back, and as we are walking I see a few more guys turn the corner coming towards us. This feels uncomfortable, but we're suburban American students, and just because a neighborhood is poor doesn't mean it's a bad neighborhood. So I just look forward and keep walking. At this point the people behind us are probably 20 meters back and the others 20 meters ahead. I hear an engine rev and squeal its tires from behind us. The wrong way. I turn around and the car has almost run down the guys who jump out of the way. The car drives up to us. It's a newer model Corolla and an older 50s Indian guy. He says, "Get in the car. These guys are definitely going to rob you and probably going to kill you." Suddenly the whole scene clicks into focus and I see it for what it is. My wife and I jump in the car as the guys all run towards us and the driver takes off avoiding them. Apparently the Indian man had seen us go down the street and watch the group of guys split up to ambush us. So he turned around and came to get us. Had he not, there was virtually zero chance that we would have gotten away without my wife getting raped, and highly likely that we both would have been killed in the process. We got home and ordered food and my wife just broke down sobbing. To this day, it still feels like a miracle, and I feel super embarrassed by it. Grand Forks, ND, the 17th of April 1997. I had spent the morning in the shadow of a 12-feet wall of sandbags that I was helping to build up to a river level of 49 feet. Around 2 p.m. I went back to my apartment to eat before heading into work, and I turned on the radio to try and catch the flood forecast. They announced that the river was currently at 48 feet 6 inches and rising at a rate of half an inch per hour. For weeks the NWS kept repeating the crest would be 49 feet in early May. Now they had changed the forecast. They were now saying the crest would be 49 feet 6 inches in the first week of May. I immediately began packing and loaded up everything I would need for several weeks before going into work. I worked at a convenience store and I made sure to fill my gas tank before I began my shift. Before my shift was over, the evacuation announcements had begun, and we were swamped with lines of cars fueling up to leave the city. 36 hours later on Saturday morning I was among the massive line of cars in the largest pre-Katrina flood evacuation in the US. I didn't get back to my apartment for months. The we need to leave now moment was the entire city. Got an Airbnb in Fort Worth at what seemed to be a spiritual retreat. We arrived to a padlocked gate with cameras, and the lady who opened the door had no shoes on. Looking around there was furniture and overgrown shrubbery everywhere. The main house was dilapidated with rotting wood. We went inside and they asked me and my girlfriend to sign waivers. This was the first red flag. We then walked out of the house to where we would be sleeping. While we walked through the compound, we saw other people that seemed somewhat normal, also without shoes. Our bedroom was an old RV near the back of the property. This RV was collapsed at the front, and they tried to cover it up with a bedsheet. After trying to reason why the situation was okay, me and my girlfriend decided to look around to make sure it wasn't as sketchy as we were making it out to be. During our walk, we saw these long wooden boxes that had strange labels on them. I was getting very cult vibes from the people there as well. Some of them seemed entranced. Then, a little girl came up to us, also, no shoes, and started talking to us. The conversation was friendly at first, but then took a turn. She said something along the lines of, "What if I cut someone up with a knife and put them in the oven?" At first, I thought she was being sarcastic or joking, but she kept following us and talking about cutting people up and cooking them, and then that's when I knew I needed to get us the frick out of there. I told the lady that me and my girlfriend wanted to get dinner in town so she could open the gate for us and let us out without arising suspicion. Later on I saw the main guy I met at the Airbnb on the Flat Earth Convention video by All Gas No Brakes on YouTube. Dude, you just escaped your own midsummer. This literally happened yesterday. So I was at work at a retail store and this guy with two massive buff guys came into the store to interrogate me about my cousin, who is on many drugs and probably owes them money. So they started to tell me to stop lying to them about me not knowing about my cousin. For more backstory in 5 inches tooth in 5 inches tooth in 5 inches tooth in. So I went to find my manager for help, but she wasn't in the store because she was on her lunch break, so I had to hide in the work bathrooms out the back until my manager found me. It was quite terrifying, and I don't even talk to my cousin because he is a terrible human being. This sort of thing really pisses me off. Not only do they expect you to snitch on your cousin, but they don't believe you even if you legitimately don't know their whereabouts. Once, while I was in high school, word got around about a party to be had at an old abandoned barn in the middle of nowhere. With little else to do, my best friend and I drove out there to see what was what. We got there, and the place is crawling with kids in various states of inebriation. Cars parked all over the place. We saw this was a bad scene, and noped out of there. On the way back to the city, we passed a bunch of cop cars hauling butt in the other direction. We missed getting swept up in the raid by about 3 minutes. Was a minor scandal next Monday, as several student athletes were caught and lost their eligibility. I was in a tiny room inside of a big room where there was a lot of servers. And you know, servers' rooms need to have air conditioners, so I was always so cold. One day, I started to feel the air warming. I didn't care, so I kept doing my things. The air became warmer and warmer, and I said something's happened. For unknown reasons, the air conditioners had stopped. I ran to the door because I thought servers were going to burn instantly, but when I touched the knob, it was burning. I almost couldn't open it. The servers were making a horrible sound. The heat was unbearable. I was sweating a lot. Before I went out of the server's room, I turned on the air conditioners and I ran away to tell people of the Enterprise what happened. Finally, nothing happened because I turned on the air conditioners. But if I hadn't done it, I would have died, because if servers set on fire, those things that put out fires, I don't know the name, I'm not English, would have left me without oxygen. They are automatic. We still don't know what happened with the air conditioners. Sorry if I misspelled something. I'm not English. I've told this story before. TLDR. At the bottom, I used to really enjoy driving around at night, especially because round where I live there are a lot of country roads and they were fun to zip around. One evening, after I'd been at a friend's house, I decided to drive to my church, about half an hour away from home, and back just listening to music. The route is one I've done most Sundays for 17 years being driven, and driving it for about 4 years at that point, so even in the dark I felt fine to go 60 miles per hour. Speed limit. I got maybe a quarter of the way there, and my stomach started really twisting. I knew that if I kept going I'd regret it, but I shook it off. It wasn't that late, and the weather was fine. I wasn't going to miss this driving opportunity, but as I got further the feeling in my stomach got so much worse and I realized I had to turn around. Just before I reached the hill pass that's about halfway to the church, I pulled a U-turn and went home, and stopped feeling so anxious and forgot about it. Next day, woke up and got in my car to go to church, to find my usual route had been closed. Turned out that on the hill pass, the road had crumbled away, leaving a sheer drop that would have been around a blind bend for me. The road issue had been called in by a driver going the opposite direction to me about 5 minutes after I'd pulled a U-turn and driven away. I'd definitely have been, at the very least, badly hurt had I kept going. TLDR. Racing around country roads at night would have got me killed had my stomach not warned me. We were sitting on the sand at the beach, talking and having drinks. I looked up at the sky behind my friends and saw this huge, dark, ominous cloud mass moving towards us. I got up and said, "Guys, we have to leave now. Huge thunderstorm coming right at us. We have about 5 minutes." We managed to reach the car but had to sit in it for a good hour while the wind and rain ravaged everything around us. Trees were left bare, benches were upturned, trash cans were dragged for half a mile. The beach club tents were blown away and some people were seriously injured when stuff fell on them. It was all over the news that evening. My friends still talk about how I saved them that day. Most people didn't move from where they were sitting, even though we tried to warn them. Same thing happened to me when I was a kid and my family was at a festival. My brother was running a booth about conservation or something and we ran and got him. The second all our car doors closed, the rain came down in buckets. Nastiest storm we'd had all year. There was hail and everything. We were playing hoops in a bad neighborhood. At some point one of the guys we were playing with got real nasty with the boys leave now. We ain't freaking with you, you need to leave. Real aggressive etc. I had noticed a black BMW circling around the playground but nothing much else. All his friends started insulting us and pushing us etc. Which was weird, we were playing with them every weekend. I had given free tutoring classes to one of their brothers. We left. That was a dang good playground. And it felt special to play with the thugs, us being with the nerdy boys. Well, 15 minutes after we left, the black BMW shot at them. Multiple casualties etc. Took my little sister along with me to the pharmacy. She was 4 or 5 at the time. We were looking for some stuff when suddenly a man walked past us with his dong out. My sister saw it before I did, because it practically dangled right before her face at one point, and asked me, "Chell, what's that?" pointing at the penis. I looked at the penis, the man, and then my sister. I covered my sister's eyes and immediately went to tell the cashier and left the store. Man, how I wanted to put him in a hospital, but I didn't want to traumatize my sister. You handled that really well. There are too many sick fricks in this world. Whilst driving on the highway, I stumbled upon some pretty big rocks in the middle of the road. Luckily I had my high beams on, and I had to come to a full stop in the middle of the highway. There wasn't an embankment anywhere near me and this wasn't a rocky area, so I was initially puzzled as to where the rocks had come from. Then I noticed a guy in my rearview mirror coming out of the bushes. It was at this exact moment where I was like, we need to leave now. I threw my car into reverse and gunned it, nearly drove over the guy in the road behind me, did a J-turn and drove in the opposite direction on travel on the highway until I found an off-ramp. This was about 11 PM at night on a segment of the highway which is notorious for hijackers. Turns out that the hijackers place massive rocks in the road at night, and when you drive headlong into the rocks and get out of your car to inspect the damage, they then pop out of the bushes and rob you at gunpoint and drive off with your car if it is still drivable. Luckily I wasn't a victim that night. God only knows what they would have done to my GF. Good old shithole Africa. I got home at 3 AM after a night with the boys. I noticed an out-of-place workers van before turning into my main street but didn't think much of it. I decided to walk my dog because we usually do it nightly off leash. As I am walking down the cross street, I see another random car in the middle of the street under a street light. No headlights on but car is on. I didn't think much of it until I made a right to loop the block and go back home. As soon I turned, I see that initial white van and I see that other car start to move and drive right behind me, still with no headlights on. And that was the moment I knew I needed to get out of there. I kinda blacked out and was in survival mode. I picked up my dog and ran as fast as I could down the street. I never looked back. I was scared they were following me home, but by the time realized what just happened, I was almost home. I never walk my dog late at night now. Walking with friends after a night out clubbing. Half dozen or so. 4F/2M if I recall correctly. We are well scantily dressed and hammered. We are also in a not so great area. Taking a shortcut from the clubs back to our hostel. Without thinking much of it, I spot a large group of men going the opposite direction across the street. A block later they're behind us and gaining fast. I did a quickie double take and stuffed everyone into the nearest subway station, where we proceeded to loiter on camera for an hour before finishing the walk home at a brisk pace. Not my bravest moment, but better safe than trafficked or dead. Went to a sketchy party. It's in a building that's pretty obviously recently abandoned. No one checked my ID, and the bar was a coffee table full of 2 liters and fifths. Whatever. I'm over 21 and this is more fun than the crappy club. I did, however, kinda move towards the back. Saw a lot of guys with 6-packs, and just a lot more people in general. Music is getting cranked up, kids are getting crunk. I figure if no one's gonna stop me, I'm going to grab a 6-pack at the party store. And if the party chills back out, I can hang around. And if it sucks, I can drink it at home. I found a store down the block, got some beers, and came back to see 20+ cop cars surrounding the place. Drank the beers at home. LOL, I thought you were talking about some really buff guys in the party. Then I realized what you mean by 6-packs. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.